Hey, hi everyone. Can you hear me? Can I just get a thumbs up or anything that can show that you can hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining the third session of the Philanthropy Reform Alliance Collaborative Unlearning Lab. And for all of us who joined in early, we appreciate you. We are excited for this session. My name is Imelda, and I will be co-facilitating this session with our colleague and friend, Dr. Ashraf. So again, I want to welcome you to the Collaborative and Learning Lab. And this particular session is going to be focusing on the politics of partnership. Yes, it's going to be focusing on the politics of partnership. And I know that you are just as much intrigued as I am for today's discussion. So I think we're just going to start right away so that we can make the best of our time. And feel free as you join us, introduce yourself. We'd like to know where you're joining us from, what you do, if you are comfortable enough to share any points, any areas that you've been reflecting on. When we shared the invites, we also put some questions of reflection. And feel free to share any reflections that came up while you were thinking around the politics of partnership. So again, my name is Imelda. I work with PRA, and I support the Unlearning Labs as well. And maybe a little about myself. At the core of what I do really is a very simple philosophy of justice, fairness, pragmatism, a sense of altruism, doing good, and just making the best out of every situation. And that partly is what led to PRA. Like I mentioned earlier, myself and a couple of development workers came up with PRA. And the heart behind PRA is really reframing how development practice is done, but also reimagining philanthropy in the development sector towards more equitable and locally led and sustainable development. Beyond PRA, technically, I'm a health economist. I for the last 15 years, I worked in the health sector with a focus on global health and health financing and health system strengthening. A lot of my work has mainly been in the health sector, but development as a whole. And I've, through the last 15 years, had the privilege of working with some very, very interesting organizations at different levels, at community level, at INGOs, with multilaterals. And I'm really glad for the opportunity to share with like-minded people as yourselves on this call. I am excited for all that we are going to be discussing here today. Yeah, I will be co-facilitating this session again with a colleague and a friend, a man who wears many hats. He's called Dr. Ashraf. He's a visiting lecturer at a university here in Uganda. Most of his work focuses really on in the department of I think philosophy and religious studies. Yeah, I hope I've got that right, Dr. Ashraf. But I know that when you get on here, you will do a much more thorough introduction of yourself. But one thing about Dr. Ashraf as well is he's had a big contribution towards decolonizing aid, in sub-Saharan Africa, and is passionate about the topic. And I just hope that I look forward to the discussion. Yeah. So today's session, again, like I said, we are basically exploring a topic that I'm also very passionate about, and that is partnerships, and looking at it from an angle of how is it defined and how is it practiced, and looking at it beyond rhetoric to real practice. So just to ground our session a little bit today, I want us to take a quick look at what do the numbers say about partnership, and where does this discussion even emanate from? Where is it coming from? So you will see indeed that the state of partnerships, not just in Africa, but beyond the global south, you will see that it moves through a chain of different actors and different players. But what the numbers show us is that there is a lot of money that is coming in as aid, over 200 billion plus, flows in annually through the global aid architecture. But again, when you look deeper to where are the decisions about these finances coming from, one thing again that you will notice that a lot of decisions about what happens with these finances, it comes from very far away from where the finances are supposed to make real change. Yeah. A lot of organizations have done studies and they say for example, 85% of humanitarian aid, is channeled through northern-based INGOs. And these are INGOs that are away. When we say northern-based, those are away from the global south, but the money channeled to the majority world. And when you look at UN funding, less than 1%, which is quite a very small number, actually goes to local and national NGOs. And yeah, the data continues. You'll see that a lot of organizations, almost 78%, they say that they are towards locally led development. Yeah. But if a lot of organizations are proponents of locally led development, then where is the money? So indeed, there are a lot of questions, and I hope that we can start to reflect on some of those questions. But also interestingly is the word partnership is not new to us. I believe that everyone on this call, if I am not mistaken, belongs to a certain form of partnership. Yeah. So you are either embedded in CBO or an NGO or foundation, but somehow you are not working alone. Yeah, you are working probably with the government, you are working with communities, and that in itself is partnership. So when we look at the word partnership, usually you'll see a lot of words, follow the word partnership, like co-creation, collaboration, mutual accountability. These are all really nice words, yeah? And when you read these words on a framework, on a report, they just paint the picture green. Yeah, they make it they make it very progressive. That partnerships are indeed going the right direction. And that is true because these words, they signal progress. When we say co-creation, it is positive. When we say collaboration, it is positive. But what we want to look at today in this lab is to go underneath the language, to go to those quieter realities about who sets the agenda one and who holds the power within those partnerships, who decides what success is, who decides what is supposed to be done, and what impact do those decisions actually have on sustainable impact. So really, no doubt, partnerships, they are happening. Partnerships are happening, and to a greater percentage, a lot of organizations are now working through consortia. They are working through partnerships with locally led organizations, which is a move in the right direction. But we want to go beyond just forming partnerships to actually looking at how do we get the best out of the partnerships that we are forming. So I would like us to look at one very common word in the development sector right now, and that is localization. You know that all of us here, if you look at your organization that you're working in right now, you have a locally led agenda that you are running, or you have a framework, something that speaks to you inclining towards locally led development. And indeed, it has been proven that a locally led development leads to a lot of sustainable impact. So a lot of our conversation today is also going to anchor on how localization is being done. Yeah, because indeed you will see that over the decade, localization has become one of those repeated words and repeated commitments beyond just our organizations, but in the global sector and in the humanitarian reform as a whole. So we see a lot of commitments towards locally led development, the grant bargain. We see a lot of foundations now looking towards funding locally led kind of development. And the language now is very clear. A lot of us agree that the power has to shift. Yeah. If we really want to reap the benefits of locally led development, then the power has to shift. The power has to shift to the organizations, the community-based organizations that are leading change within their community. So that is something that a lot of us agree with. It is something that a lot of funders are now looking towards. How do we position community-based organizations or community-led interventions to thrive? Yeah. But in the intersection of that discussion is an aspect of power. Because indeed, for these organizations to thrive, then there has to be a shift of power. Yeah. And now that's where this becomes a very big paradox. So you'll see that the language is shifting. A lot of partners, they are talking localization. But when you look at what is really happening on the ground, some things they come into question. And again, just to make it clear that a lot is already happening, yeah? And we are in the right direction. Yeah, we are in the right direction. But again, the aspect of unlearning is making sure that we make the most out of what we are intending to achieve with our initiatives. But again, we want to dive deeper to see beyond just implementation, how much more are these organizations actually contributing? So I want us to take some time to look at this very beautiful picture, which just shows the journey of how money flows, yeah, but also aspects of control. Who holds more control? Who makes the decisions? And let me just get my pointer. So here, I believe that most of us fall within this corner. Either you are a donor, foundation, or you are an intermediary, the INGOs, the big organizations like World Vision, Save the Children, yeah, or multilaterals, or you are a local partner, an NGO, or you are the community, yeah, the community-based organizations, the grassroots. But one thing that indeed you will notice, again, based on our discussion in the last club, I remember, I think Moses he very clearly said, usually where the funding is where the decision-making power is. Yeah, I don't know if we all agree with that. Yeah, but you will see that indeed a lot of control remains where the money is. So you will see that the donors, the foundations, most of them are set the agenda. Not all of them. We have a lot of donors that are now progressive. They are looking at trust-based philanthropy, community-centered fundraising, participatory grant making. So yes, there are a lot of progressive funders now. And then we have the INGO. And here at the INGO, you will see this is where the decisions are mostly made, yeah? How is the money going to be used? To who and on what terms? And then we have the local partners and the communities. But when you look at this side, the left side of this picture, you will see indeed that as this chain goes down, the control and the decision-making power also goes down. And so do the finances. Interestingly, the biggest, where the biggest decisions about finances are made are somehow within the INGO, because the INGO mediates the funds between the donor and the community. So they decide how this partnership is going to happen. Yeah. I believe that all of us somehow fit in this. And as you look at this picture, I just want us to begin to reflect on what contribution are we making, yeah, at the different levels of where we are embedded, what contribution are we making? So, and indeed, even just go beyond this picture and think about your own organizations, your documents, your frameworks, your proposals. How are all these things being embedded in there? Because indeed, beyond just saying that there is a partnership, for example, between the INGO and the community, how is that partnership being done? Yeah, who decides? A majority of us will agree on is that one of the reasons that we work with community-led organizations is we believe that impact is more sustainable, yeah, when the community takes lead in the initiatives. So now the question that I want you to sit with, if impact is more sustainable at community level, then why does the community have less say? We'll just park that and get back to it later. But beyond everything that we have discussed today, one thing that I want to shine a light on is there are a lot of incentives that determine how business is done. And even as we transition into the unlearning journey that Dr. Ashraf is going to lead us into, there are a lot of incentives that decide how business is actually run in the development sector. And this look at accountability. Where is accountability required? How does accountability flow? And how willing are we to make those changes? But also control, aspects of control. A lot of organizations are comfortable with what they are able to control. And they feel like when they release or delegate some of that power, then it opens a door to risk. And again, as we get into unlearning, we want to dig deep into what assumptions accompany statements like this. What things have we led ourselves to believe about risk and where risk is actually located, mostly in the continuum of partnership within the development sector. But also you notice that a lot of systems actually reward predictability. Yeah. If there's a straight road going to point A, we would be more comfortable taking the straight road than taking the road that would lead to C and D and B. Why not just go straight to B? So you'll see that a lot of systems reward predictability. So again, I want to just pose one question here is, what do we have to do for power to really shift? Yeah. What would institutions, our institutions that we are embedded in, have to give up in order for power to genuinely move down where it actually makes the biggest impact? And again, to really understand why this perceives, we have to look beyond just the intentions, because usually people's intentions are good, but also look at the incentives even as we reflect. Yeah. So I am going to hand this over to Dr. Ashraf, who is going to take us through the biggest part of the conversations. But I also just wanted to point out that even as we reflect, we need to look at the cost of partnership theater. If partnerships are not done right, what does it cost the development sector? Yeah. If the power is not shifting as it should, what does it cost sustainable development? But beyond just the system, what does it cost you, the individual or the development practitioner within the system? I don't know if we've heard of self-censoring. Have you ever been in a meeting and in a partnership meeting and you have to run through what you want to say in your head for about 3 minutes before actually saying it, because you're trying to be appropriate? You are trying to sound right. Yeah. So those are things that we are going to be reflecting to deeply. And before we get into that reflection, I just want to introduce some terms that we will sit through even as we go through our discussion. And I know that we've interfaced with these terms very commonly in the development sector, or at least the definition of them. Yeah. We have saviorism, which is a very common term in the development sector. So saviorism really is the belief that the right solutions to a problem have to come from elsewhere. And then we also have something very related to saviorism, which is the dependency logic, where again we assume that certain communities cannot get themselves out, for example, and that is where you have a lot of discussions around capacity. You want to subgrant to an organization, but then you are worried, do they have the capacity? And really with epistemic hierarchies that on, it is quite very difficult to determine who has the capacity and who doesn't. Yeah, and not to downplay the aspect of capacity. Yes, the issue of capacity is big. But when we look beyond our definitions of what a community is able to do, you will indeed find that within those definitions, there are things that the community can do much more easily without harvesting help from outside the community, I would say. We have the urgency culture, where the report was needed yesterday, that proposal has to go out yesterday. Everything is very urgent, yeah? Everything is very urgent. And we talk about participation. Participation gets very slow. If, for example, I have to make say in my household, I have to make a decision of we are going to eat for supper. Want to eat, maybe say an omelette, but then I have 4 other people in my household who one wants to eat potatoes, the other probably wants to eat rice and all that. So just getting down to that decision, sometimes it's just easy for me to make the decision as the one going to cook. And I think that is the same thing with, again, partnerships. You'll find that sometimes, because of the urgency that has been put around all processes, majority of processes in the development sector, you'll find that participation or engagement becomes slow. Yeah. And sometimes it's just easier to make these decisions in one place or to center this decision making. So we also have extractive participation, where we take and take and take and not give. Yeah, we work with, for example, a community, they contribute the biggest part to our work, but they are not acknowledged in our reports, and which is very closely related to tokenism, where because we are saying that we are localizing, we just bring in two CBOs, give them 0 point something % of the funding, and then report that as localization, which is mostly tokenism and not localization. Dr. Ashraf, I will hand it over to you here. And again, just to that this is an unlearning space. We are not here to find all the answers, but just to reflect and surface and question some of the narratives that have been normalized within the development sector, and explore other options of doing things differently and see what that could mean for equitable and sustainable development. Okay, so thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Ashraf.
I thank you so much for the brief session that you have taken us through. I also want to thank the colleagues that have managed to make it to the call, which is of course not our first call, but one of the continuous call that is part of the kind of work that we are doing. You've done a lot of quite tremendous work about giving us a brief for some of us who are either joining for the first time or who are still grappling with the question of the Unlearning Lab. And today's session is purely what are we grappling with that we usually need to do about what we are doing to do. And Major, as you said, we are just discussing about how does partnership works in practice. The questions dealing with hierarchies. Do they exist? If they exist, do we realize that they exist? Anyway, are we bothered about them, that they have an impact on what we do? Or if not about that, how do you overcome to move forward from there? But as you would say, I also emphasize that this is not a linear, or it's not parallel. It is not one-way traffic. It is a conversation. We are not giving a lecture of ABCD. We are having a pure conversation about these questions. So as you push about, you talked about censorship, self-censorship. You talk about the questions that are coming with the saviorism, questions talking about the ingenuity or genuinity, by the context about that. So one would be able to, for example, to reflect on be able to say something here small. So somebody would be able to go into the questions of the unspoken truth. And in this perspective, if we are looking about, for example, you are in a setting whether coming from the vantage point where you're coming from, building on the slide of self-censorship, to move on to the next. What comes in the mind if you're in a meeting like this, or when you're in a boardroom, or you are in even if in a court? Because traditionally, most people, we are taken by the question of a meeting, or when we are meeting donors, and we take them in the preoccupation of being physical. But just imagine you are in a meeting, and the way you say that, yes, have you ever self-censored in a partnership space? Now the question is, if yes, how many times? Occasionally, somebody will say, yes, this has happened much, this hasn't happened. Somebody may say, I don't prefer to say, because some of the people who made us to be self-censored are on the call, and they will be able to realize about this. But that's not true about that. It is really to take an example. I want to give an example from, we need a practical example, for example, the colleagues who are on the call here. As a program officer, just getting it, then move. As a program officer, at maybe an NGO, it can be national NGO, civil society, or a partner. Yes, so I'm saying I was getting some. So bring it back to the table here. Is the story is lower, of course, some defensive, but what comes in your mind as somebody who has participated in these meetings? Do you make decisions? Do you keep quiet because you don't know what to say, or because you don't have what to say, perhaps, or maybe because what you want to say is going to go to the consequences of somebody was sharing the best, like this example when we were having this conversation 2 weeks ago. So these are some of the reflections from the experiences that moving away from the abstract, where we say ABCD, but now here we are the ones on the ground. We are doing the work the way we are doing it, and we are experiencing these things. So what comes in your mind? It is a very big question that we look about it in that. So I don't know, either we can say either people can raise up some hands, or we can drop in the chat, depending on how it works to come on mind about it, without naming organizations, or we even don't name organizations or individuals. What is one unspoken truth about partnerships in development? You don't need to mention that is one. So it's NGO, this civil society, this and this. You can just type in the chat box, or you can even feel free to raise up the hand, and then the co-facilitator will be able to say just that unspoken truth that exists in partnerships, because there is always that one unspoken truth which exists in the partnerships that we do when we are in the development work across time and space. I just want to pause that, and then we see. Either you can put in the chat, or you can just raise up a hand and we hear your voice. So you can just take any preference. And then we see the different angles that come in. Don't forget, you are managing my time. You are the timekeeper with the bell.
So I think we can still go on as people drop those chats, that feedback within the chat.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So maybe I can read for you. I can see that Imani from Nairobi says more impact. Yeah.
Okay, I've seen that.
Maybe she can build on that. He can build on that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thanks, Imelda, and thank you, Mugalula, for this insightful session on philanthropy. One thing I carry from impacts, from partnerships, especially those working with government and other stakeholders in partnership, then you realize there is more impact and change at where we sit or where we work. So I believe that is one thing that comes through partnerships, especially private public partnerships. Thank you, and back to you.
Right. Thank you, Enoch.
Thank you so much, Enoch. That is that's so open and more diverse about the private-public partnerships, and they give us leaves to borrow from, to be able to comprehend and be able to appreciate. So when you look about, for example, as we continue the conversation, there are questions that we need to, of course, to ponder about. Can the partnerships truly be equal within the existing aid structures, the one that we are speaking right now currently, those structures that we are already working with? Can these partnerships be really equal, or truly, it can be not really, but it can be truly equal within the existing structure? Then what assumptions do we carry about expertise and the question of legitimacy? Then how do funding and institutional repetition shape whose voices matter? What behaviors have we accepted as normal, in quotes, in the partnerships? Because it is us to choose it is us to reflect about them. Do they really exist? If they don't, what should we do about that? When I was in Nigeria, all of this month, all of this year, we were sharing about the decolonization project in the community development work with the African Studies Association, and then with the African Union and ANANEPA representatives when they were reviewing the Agenda 2063. So when we had some cup of coffee, a colleague shared this with me. So I felt like it is also a part for us to have some sight about it. So he told me that in a regional consortium meeting, the agenda was purely in English, but the facilitator spoke very quickly. The international partners dominated the discussion. which I don't know whether it is because the agenda was in the meeting and that was the official language, but that was just the conversation. The local partners from the Francophone countries sat quietly because they were not even, they didn't even break. One of them was whispered. So in most cases for him, we say that what he only understood half was that he was too ashamed to ask for a translation because they already think that when the moment you ask for translation or translators, you are less capable of implementing the project, or you are not innovative enough to overcome certain challenges. So this was the experience that he was sharing with me, and it was a real experience because we were in Lagos, but the fact that the meeting was also from the Francophone, and then the parts of the people were from the Anglophone. But these are the questions that these are his observations. So of course, at the end of the day, for him is that full partnership come from all partners. That's what we were discussing, and then we're having these reflections after our cup of coffee and the day. But then the Francophone voices were never heard. So if you say that full partnership is when all of us who are here on the call, wherever we are coming with our backgrounds and whatever we do, and whatever capacity we are coming from, it is the collective voices. But then you take an example of where we are speaking here, but some colleagues here on the call are not even understanding what we are speaking about. It means that to a certain extent, it is not because it is nothing to say, but it is because the meeting was not designed for them to speak. It can be a technical knockout, or it can be consciously taken as, or it can be a deliberate move within this that if a category of people, when we give them a chance to speak about this, and this, we shall not be able to proceed to the next session or this and this because they are going to ask a lot of questions and then they are going to trigger out certain things. And that's what we are asking. What have we inherited about leadership, collaboration, authority that we may need to unlearn in the consequences? Moving from what the first speaker, Akurut, was talking about, the thing that she gave about the background, the different statistics or figures which are telling us where we are currently and where are they coming from, the state of civil society reports, and then who is getting what and who is not getting what. So what have we inherited that for you think, ideally, we need to unlearn? And these are cross-cutting. These are about leadership styles. This is about collaboration, the way we collaborate or the way we work with each other in the development work, or even the authority, the way we exercise power when we are doing certain things in the communities. These give us a lot of things. So let us think about them. Is there anything that you think that we have inherited and we have lived with it and we have worked with it in line with leadership, collaboration, and authority, that you think it is high time we rethink how we collaborate with others, how we look about leadership, because these are some things we learn them through socialization. Some of them we learn through the different spaces where we are, but it's not necessarily that we be able to unpack at the same time. So I posed that question to the chat, and then we can have a reflection about it.
So we have some reflections from the chat, and Daphne says a sustainability challenge. When the money leaves, we stop seeing the impact of the initiative. And maybe just to add a little on what Daphne has already submitted is that oftentimes we rely on the community that we are implementing in to sustain our initiatives. So for example, if I go to community B, the hope and what we report as our sustainability plan is for community B to sustain that intervention when funding stops. Yeah. But again, building on what Daphne says here, you will see indeed that when the funding stops, so does the intervention. So it brings a lot of things to question, because usually in our engagements with communities, we do a lot of capacity building. We do a lot of capacity building where we are building the capacity. I am not a very big fan of the word capacity building, actually. But yes, you hear a lot of, we are building the capacity of the CBOs of the community so that they are able to sustain these initiatives when funding closes. So if we are building, again, just a question for reflection is, if we are building the capacity of the communities, then they should ideally be able to sustain these interventions, at least to a certain degree when we leave, if indeed the interventions were designed with them and are context specific. I mean, context aligned to the context of the community. But also, Rhoda says that when there is a true partnership, you are assured of continuation and not struggling to write a lot of proposals. Instead, you use more time in community development, hence more transformation takes place. I totally agree with you, Rhoda, on that as well. Because the time that a lot of organizations put to get funding of, say, $2,000, $5,000, when you compute that back into cost, real cost, when you add value to it, you'll find that eventually it's actually expensive. So that is what we have in the chat. John Paul says, a thought-provoking session. The session has challenged us to look beyond the language of partnership and critically examine the structures and behaviors that influence participation, decision-making, and equity within collaboration. Great insight there from John Paul. Over to you, Dr. Ashraf.
Yeah, so you see, from what you have just opened up and from what colleagues have just shared, will tell us a lot of things. Issues of lack of mutuality, there are challenges concerning with trust, issues of professionalized power, bring in the question of survivalism, where you bring now, they also bring the issues of self-censorship, questions of community extraction, because somebody was talking about I also share the same inch about certain words that I'm so careful about using. For example, recently I moved away from calling the Global South. I've started adopting the language that this is an agrarian South. We don't need to call it the Global South because this side is pure agrarian. So we need to just accept the truth that this is agrarian South. Let the other people from the other side find a way they can name it, but we can't just remain with those because we need to move away from dichotomies. This dichotomization is done that gives us the things. Because look about, for example, somebody talked about it. You talked about from the extraction of the group in the chat, that capacity building. What does it insinuate when you say that in the budget, we are coming to build your capacities? This already signifies that we have already put you in a segment where before you reach on a certain level, we need to bring you up, and then we give you certain things, and then you'll be able to say or to engage with us. That language is wrong. Just imagine in the morning, if we start with communities, if we first introduced, before we do anything, we first introduced our names, who you are, where are you coming from, what do you do, we have lunch together, we have breakfast together, even supper together, we work together in the village or in the community, and then later we start the conversation. How do you think about that? Other than taking photographs, fighting with the way you talked about the beginning, deadlines, we have to submit financial reports, the financial is ending, the other side, ours is still going on. Issues of they need pictures which are like this, they need a proposal which everything is like this and this, and then later we start calling our workmates. You are the supervisor, you say, please, I request you to work on the weekend because the donors are closing on Monday, they want the reports. So there are a lot of things about that. So what we need is to, yes, they exist, and some of them we have lived with them, because there is the other question that if you point at A, B, C, D, next session, we shall not send the money for the next quarter. So people are going to be unemployed. The organization will not run. And then you look about that. But now that's what we are thinking about the question. If really we mean for the community, at what point do we translate results? For example, we write reports, we go for M&E. We do baseline surveys, we do end-line surveys. You ask yourself, how many times have you gone back to the communities where we took pictures, everything, and we have shared this information apart from giving them biscuits, giving them some mineral water, and some transport refund, and then later we promise them that when we finish up the work, we shall come back in a community balaza and we share the report with. I have many people that have interviewed me, and I usually ask them that I need a copy to put in my office, or I need a copy to put in my library at home, or I need a copy to this. I need can't you translate this into Luganda or Soga? So that even my mother who is in the forest, and you're talking about domestic violence, you're talking about your project about sickle cell, you're talking about Ebola, recently Ebola, and then you are using Ebola. My mother doesn't understand Ebola other than you sent it. She knows that the disease doesn't have medicine to cure it. Can you go beyond Ebola and the medicine and knows that? How do you think my mother will feel when she's reading issues how to prevent Ebola, issues how to prevent domestic violence, how to report cases of GDVB, when she's reading it in Luganda, Lunyankole, Lutolo, or Iteso, or Jabadola, or Lulamoji, or Lusoga, which she understands well. And just imagine about that. But because we are supposed to confine to what the global funders, or maybe to what the donor, without pinpointing anywhere professionally, but what donor X, donor B, or partner C, or grantor D, or financer C requests. Because if you do the contrary, you fear. It's like when you are in a meeting, when you say, if you ask the boss, there are people who are known. For example, I have a colleague, there was an SMT which was going to sit to make decisions about reduction. And then he started sending emails to tell what people should say in the meeting, because the donors, in quotes, are going to participate in the meeting. So he started telling them, even to that extent of giving them questions to ask. When the question and answer comes, this person was on their neck. Please, you better keep quiet. You better keep quiet. But if you want to ask these questions, how do you tell an adult with a bachelor's, with postgraduate, master's, even to an extent of a PhD, you tell them that when we are on the call, please, you should ask these questions, don't go astray. Which kind of leadership is that? Which kind of engagement is that? So that's what the things that you bring from the table have told us. And that's what the colleagues are saying in the chat, that we need to rethink alternative ways about the existing structures, how we operate within our networks, within either inside locally or externally. So this takes us to the question of reframing. How should we imagine? Just there is what you call the veil of ignorance. For example, in political economy, you get a black strip like this. So you cover your eyes like this. Now, within when you're making decisions, you preempt that you don't see anybody. You don't, among the people you're seeing, there is no your wife, there is no your child, there is no your workman, there is no your in-laws, but you are seeing one person called humanity. So any decisions you make, you don't know whether it is going to affect. If it is good, it is benefiting whoever you will see. If it is bad, it is going even to impact even your immediate your immediate friends. So that's how, those are one of the strategies or the principles when they are making some, maybe for example, debating laws or even making decisions for the greatest benefit beyond the majority question. So here, we have spent time naming what is wrong, the way we have discussed it, ABCD, keeping quiet, using the communities. We take reports, we take photographs, we write proposals, we attach audited reports. It means that if you don't have edited reports, if you don't have social media accounts, you don't have an active website. Now it takes up what she was saying. You need a capacity building, how to have a good website, how to have audited books, but they will not be able to ask, which problem are you solving in the community? Before we talk about the website, before we talk about audited books of accounts, we talk about annual reports. So you want an NGO, which has started today, which has been launched today, tomorrow they are applying for some funding to do some work about sickle cell awareness or to do about child marriage, and then you want them to give you audited reports, at least 5, and you want them to compete with somebody, an NGO or an organization which has been in place for the last 15 years. And then you say, we are partnering together. We are collaborating on this project. Which type of collaboration is that? Those are the hidden hierarchies that she was talking about in the beginning. You may not be able to identify them, but they exist. You cannot get Golola, my elder brother, Moses Golola, and then you put him in the same boxing ring with me. Me, I'm 45 kilograms. And then Golola is 190. And then you say, please, you start. Now, really, what is that? So these are the realities that we are dealing with. Because it takes away from understanding the real issue. The problem is to ask, Mrs. Opio, which kind of work are you doing in Soroti? Should we discuss about the real problems that we are facing, and then how do you come in? I was discussing with my sister some time back when we were preparing this call. I had some colleagues who visited me from UK. And the way we are discussing like this, it was an open discussion, I want to assure you. We were in my office, but it was very open. No one talked about the audited books of accounts. No one talked about the annual reports. No, they specifically chipped in Uganda to just come and we have a conversation about issues of peace building when we are using talents like football, netball, athletics, identifying talents of young people, and we solve societal problems. That's what brought them. I thought maybe it was beyond that. We never discussed. Then later, things came out. When they shared the template to develop a proposal, it was a 3-page template, 3-page template, 3-page like this, 3, no attachments, 3. I used only 10 minutes to fill the template. And then that is the kind of, I don't think, how do you feel? How do you feel when you meet such collaborators or such partners or such funders or such people who are genuinely interested in trickling to the communities? So moving away from that, let us imagining otherwise. For example, if we have spent time talking about the other things, now let us imagine what could work differently by ourselves without imposition. Because here we are saying we are unlearning. You see, unlearning is one of the hardest ways. First of all, it is not by imposition. It is not by consensus. It is by intentional. It is intentional and spatial. So it is us to reimagine. So we need to spend this current, do we need to suspend the current institutional constraints? For example, budgets, donor requirements, reporting templates. Just imagine from wherever you are, wherever you have joined the call from, like my brother, Enoch, who is joining from our colleagues from Kenya. You just need to imagine, for you who is around Kampala, or is in Uganda, or is in Africa, or even beyond the continent, and you're in the global world, in the global village. Think, just imagine, it's not that it's a straight jacket that what you're telling us is what we are going with. No. Within your vantage point, stand from where you are, like the way I'm standing, where am I? For example, where Pio is standing from where she is. Ivan is standing from where he is also. Barbara, Peace, Mbabas, etc. Brenda, just imagine, what do we need to imagine from the constraints? Because these are realities. We are the implementers. Because here we are not remaining in abstract. We are in the concrete is what we call, we are in the ground, that even if you ask me that I was taught to go and meet the president of the Republic of Uganda, the first time is that, is there an opportunity to ask questions? That's the question people ask. Is there an opportunity to ask questions? Then they'll tell you yes. Now, it might be different from this perspective, because you have imagination that maybe people tell you that when you go to meet the head of the state, you don't ask questions. But now here you say, the person who has invited you is telling that, please, it is open. You ask any question you want. So in that context, just imagine, spend some time Though we have named those other things trickling down, interconnecting them, bringing them and breaking the dichotomies. Just think about them.
So as we reflect on that, I also just there's something that Dr. Ashraf said that reminded me of something very interesting. So earlier, 3 months ago, I was supporting some organization to apply for a grant. And this was an NGO, yeah? Their works just at national level, but their focus has been in this one area of SDB for a very, very long time. So they've really built a lot of expertise in the area. So they were applying for funding at a bigger foundation, and it was a lot of money, actually. And unfortunately, they didn't get it. But they were competing with another INGO, a big INGO here. The INGO got it, yeah? And when the INGO got it, because they are localizing, they are working on locally led development, eventually they started to look out for partners who they can subgrant to, yeah, in their localization agenda. And because this NGO has been in this sector for over 10 years, they ended up subgranting to this NGO. So I think for me, one of the things that I reflect on is both these people competed for this funding, yeah. And this INGO, from their assessment, they saw that this NGO was capable of implementing to the fullest, and yet this NGO did not receive that funding directly. And at the end of the day, the work is going to be the same. The reporting needs will be the same. The capacity required to deliver on the role will be the same, but the only difference is that they are not trusted enough to handle this money. So it creates a lot of reflections, especially now when funding cuts are happening. Yeah. Because every organization that participates in the implementation will require indirect costs. In fact, when you look at it, you will find that the INGO takes the biggest portion of the indirect costs, and then the NGO who is implementing is mainly given project costs. And yet we expect those NGOs to sustain, we expect the CBOs to sustain. So I think that is also something that we need to reflect on in the sector. Who defines what legitimacy really is? Because in this case, what was used to disqualify this NGO, and yet eventually they ended up implementing the project anyway, taking up the project for implementation. So yeah, that was just also a reflection point that I wanted to put forward. I'll look into the chat and see if we have any feedback. So Lillian says, I deeply resonate with what Dr. is sharing. I designed a small community initiative to support young women in agri-food systems. And the biggest hurdle I am facing anytime I see calls for grants is the requirements such as 2 to 3 years of registration, audited books of accounts, statements of impact, and so on and so on. That is from Lillian. Thank you for sharing your feedback with us. Yeah, interesting. Over to you, Dr. Ashraf.
Yeah. So this does not offend the colleagues on the call. In the morning, we had a dry run-up for our session with the convener, and then shortly she let me go to do other things as we wait for this one. That's what she told me, that I let you go as we wait to meet in the evening. So we are here. So I went for a conversation. So today I had a refreshing conversation with the donor representative that I told you about. And this has reminded me what genuine partnership can feel like from, if you feel it. There was no funding discussion on the table. Instead, there was curiosity, listening, mutual respect, and space to reflect honestly on the opportunities and the challenges facing younger people in rural communities, because it was specific, facing young people in rural communities across not only Uganda, but it is across the sub-Saharan Africa, and even specifically because we are moved by the global goals. So it was one of those conversations where I did not feel like I was defending the kind of work that we are doing, either in the university or outside the university. But I was not like I didn't feel like I'm trying to convince someone about the realities that communities face. When we are discussing them, when they were also seeing them, some of them grew up within these realities and they just maneuvered through to overcome the challenges of youth unemployment. So I was simply allowed to speak openly about what we are seeing manifesting in different formats. What is working, what is not working, and where I believe the sector, the younger people sector, the agriculture sector, the peace and security agenda needs to think more deeply, not within a conventional way that this is how we are supposed to overcome this problem. That when the younger people are recruited into terroristic groups, there is a certain organization or international body which is going to say, the narrative is we need to create jobs. Now the narrative, we say the policy will be the youth policy employment, without even asking the younger people and the people, NGOs and CBOs and organizations which are working directly with these young people. They just bring a policy and say, there's a grant on this and this. We are going to create employment for young people. So it was, I've left the conversation today unusual because I've been energized more. The experience reminded me that some of the most valuable things that donors and partners can offer are not always financial. What we think is that there is not always financial resources in quotes. Sometimes it is a question of trust. And as the speaker said in the beginning when she was giving us an intro, she spoke something about trust. If we want partnership to move, we are saying that we need to build partnership. Why do the reporting systems are the same, the amount of grant is the same, the problem that is being solved is the same, these organizations are in the same country, then you decide to give A and you reject to give B. But the question is not about that B doesn't need the resources, or the problem is not there on the concrete, on the ground. But the problem is you don't trust them with the money. The money is too much. They might misuse it. They have not handled such huge amount of money. So if they have not handled such huge amount of money, at what point in time would they handle such a good amount of money so that the next donor doesn't again quarrel them on the same question if you've denied them chance? I usually tell people, in the afternoon I was teaching my PhD students. And then I was told there is a student of mine who is in the labor. She's going to give birth. Actually, I'm just seeing a notification on WhatsApp. She has given twins recently, 1 hour ago. So the gentlemen were asking, what really happens in the labor ward? So I said, no, you wait. If you want to know what happened in the labor ward, you conceive and become pregnant. The day you go there is when you come and tell us what happens there. But right now, don't ask because you don't have any pregnancy. And there's nothing that you know what happens there. So if you don't give people chance about to use it, if you don't give me chance to see how to spend 100,000, it means that even another person is going to come and ask me, have you ever handled 100,000 on your account? I say no. Then say, oh no, if I give him 200,000, he will not manage. So it is a question, it is just 1 inch trust. So if we move about that it is sometimes trust, it is even beyond trust sometimes. It is also goes beyond sometimes. It is listening. Yes, you have asked, like my sister said, she has an initiative, but they need audited books of accounts, they need the report of impact, etc. Can you lend ears to this person and you listen why the website is not there, why the social media accounts are not active, why the audited books of accounts are not there? Do you listen? You never know that in the process of listening, you may be able to grasp something beyond into this is a scammer, these people are con men or con women, and then you'll be even able to move to the realities. So sometimes is to creating a room for local actors to think aloud, because we have had enough from the international actors or the national actors. But sometimes it is to speak and give chance to these local actors here to think aloud, reflect honestly, and be able to tell you the reasons why these audited books of accounts are not in place. Then, and contribute to their expertise, being honored by years of lived experiences. Because these people are in their communities, have lived in the communities for many years. So if you don't listen to them, if you don't trust them, if you don't give them a chance to allow certain things, you are the one losing out. Because it is time for me, if you listen to me, and then I also listen to you, that's what partnership is. That's what mutual collaboration is. But if you want me, just imagine when you move in a room and then later in that room, you find a document and then you append your signature because you are signing for transport refund per diem. You see, most people are interested in those things, per diem, transport refund, etc. Now, later we ask you, how did this project come in? Then later somebody goes on social media or Twitter and X and say, we co-created this with organization B, A, B, C, D, C. How many people have the capacity to go on that X and respond that, no, me, I just appended the signature on behalf of the ED? How many? But most things that we say, I want to say this categorically and explicitly and openly. Before you go into a meeting, the real conversations happen before the meeting. They don't happen in the meeting. For this session here, the conversations we are having, the reflections that people are giving, they are not happening right now. They happened even before they logged in here. That is what we call whispering. Usually see people in the corridor talks. That's where the real conversation is, in the corridor talks, not because we are in the meeting and taking tea, no. So if you cannot reflect and say what is there, there is a problem. So what I say is that now, I pause, that is what genuine partnership looks like for me. And that's what I think the rest of us dream about. That if we should be able to unlearn, there is that one thing that this is the kind of partnership that we need to move beyond with this. Listen to people, trust them, give them a chance to speak, take local knowledge to build on what they spoke about in the previous production, that sustainability. Just imagine if the funding goes away. Many people have moved away. DGDF moved away from Uganda. When DDF went away, did we stop having problems? UK pulled out sometime. Saiders pulled out. They pulled out. Are we stopping to solve problems, or the problems ended? So the question is, do the community structures the way, this is the thing that preoccupied my mind to join the Unlearning Lab and then the PRA Alliance, is about we don't want to leave that when we are there. The question is, even if funds stop, even if resources end, can the initiatives that we started in the community be sustainable so that they cannot be called that when you went away, the school closed. When you went away, the borehole collapsed. When you went away, the hospital no longer works. We are dying more than the time when we were here. So those are some of the things. So imagine, what would partnership meetings feel like? That is, imagine this. I'm inviting participants here with these questions. Who would speak first? How would decisions be made? What would accountability look like? These are the imaginative prompts that I'm throwing up to you to as we transcend towards landing, in case we are in the plane. What would accountability look like? What would no longer exist about our imaginative alternatives when we are learning? What would become possible? Now, what would become possible? So reflect about those things and then get back to me just 2 to 3 minutes. And then you can put in the chat, or you can do the usual thing. You put up, you raise the hand, and we hear your voice, or we can contribute. But these are so key for us when we are towards landing the conclusion of this. What would partnership meetings look like? Who would speak first if things have changed? How would decisions be made? What would accountability look like? Because already we know the current accountability landscape. Of currently, we know who speaks first. But we are asking, what would accountability look like? What would no longer exist? Then finally, what would become possible after our imaginations, after our alternative thinking and restructuring the existing development aid in that context?
Thank you, Dr. Ashraf. If you want, just give input. We don't want this to be a monologue, so we invite you to share some feedback. And as we do that, we have we've shared a Mentimeter on the chat, and would really love to get your feedback on if you see the chat, you're going to see a Mentimeter. We just have a couple of questions, 1 or 2. We want to get your experience on how partnerships is, where you see it. Yeah, feel free to just unmute and respond. Our time is fast spent, so we should be coming to a close in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah, we should be coming to a close in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So let me just look at the chat again and see if we have any feedback from the chat. Yeah, and maybe also just to say is that in the last few minutes, we've talked about a partnership. Indeed, we've explored a partnership and seen that whereas it's happening, it may not be ideally as we would like it to be. But one thing that we also, again, recognize is that these systems are made up of people like us. Yeah. These partnerships are designed by people like us. The systems that advance the things we do not want are made up of people like us. So again, that's with us, yeah? Make that in personal initiative change to decolonize your own mind and see how can things be done.
So I was saying that as we wait for colleagues to chip in with what they're saying, that because I said that I'm towards landing, how do we imagine a new agenda, or how do we imagine a new landscape in this partnership with these hierarchies and professionals, the power, self-censorship, community extraction, performance partnerships? How performance partnership works? You just be on the end and then you send somebody, implements, you sign a contract, and then later you say we are collaborating. That's not collaboration. You are acting as a performer of someone here. It is a contract because you never participated in it. So now observation, and then we are going for the final landing, which is reimagination. So the emphasis I wanted to make here is that, colleagues, imagination is central to unlearning because it disrupts the belief that the current systems are inevitable. She talked about something briefly, that these systems are co-created by us and they are sustained by ourselves. So there is that narrative that these systems have been like this and they were like this and you can't tamper with them. No, they are not inevitable. The current systems can be rethink. There's what we call that you rethink. When you rethink, you re-strategize. When you strategize, then you get a new alternative. So what we are saying is that what will carry forward? We cannot change everything overnight. It cannot happen. Somebody will tell you Rome was not built in one day. That is true. But we can change. We can each make one shift. Take one thing to identify. Don't leave this conversation on. We don't want this learning lab to end when we are saying that we are going to change everything. No, the structure is not like that. We can't change everything overnight. But on one assumption, you are unlearning. On one shift, you want to make. On one practice, you want to experiment with. So what will you question more intentional? How might you create more space for shared ownership? These are reflections when you want to unlearn certain things. What partnership behavior do you want to stop reproducing after this session? What will you question more intentionally? Of course, in a professional manner and well-etiquette manner. How might you create more space for a shared ownership? What partnership behavior do you want to stop reproducing? This can be, for example, change meeting formats, looking about share budget openly, don't hide budgets from people, slow down, ask different questions, stop using maybe some languages, share accuracy, create maybe safe feedback channels and mechanisms among others. One thing I want to do is that don't try to change everything. This is for my emphasis, from my experience. Don't try to change everything. Pick one thing. Tomorrow morning, the other day, afternoon, evening, 1 month, 1 week, what will you do differently is what matters, that you learned something and you unlearned it, then later you relearned it, because we learn, unlearn, and then relearn, and that is it. So let us move about that. That one thing I want to tell you, that one tension, one possibility, and then leaving no one behind. So unlearning is not about arriving at a perfection. We are not here for perfectionism, no. It is about becoming more aware of the systems that we reproduce and more intentional about the futures that we choose to build together. Because the systems that we reflect and we reproduce, they are the very systems that we build together for time, across time and space. I want to thank you for your honesty, your courage, your imagination. And these conversations are not easy, but they are necessary if we are to move forward. And let us stay connected and keep practicing whatever if that we have looked about that. So that is it. I get back to you, to the political command center of the moderator or the conveners. I thank you. if there's
Thank you.
anything, I'll be able to come and shed more light also about that. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ashraf, Dr. Ashraf. So we are coming to a close in the next 1 or 2 minutes, but we just want to get some feedback here. And just in one word, we have a Mentimeter going on. If you just take one minute or less to respond to it, but also just in one word, what are you leaving this space with today? Again, unlearning is a process. And I think that for today, we've just reflected. It's a whole cyclic process. Through reflecting, through questioning and learning, reframing and enabling practice change. So it is a whole cycle. But maybe to start with, where do we stand as of now? In one word, what are you leaving this space with? You can just drop it in the chat. We just want to get a feel on how the session today has been. And then also, we encourage you to visit our website. We have several streams of unlearning sessions that we are going to be working on in the next couple of months. And also, this is going to be our second last, actually, I would say our last issue-based lab. But on the 24th of July, we have someone who is going to be speaking on trust-based philanthropy. So we have someone who is going to be speaking on trust-based philanthropy, introducing the concepts of trust-based philanthropy. And we invite you to join the session in July. And then after that, we intend to have a more structured unlearning lab sessions. So if you want to participate in the next sessions going forward, we do visit our website and explore some of the topics or the streams that you would want to explore over the next 6 weeks. We also encourage you to follow our LinkedIn page and keep in touch with what we are working on and share your feedback as much as possible. Again, this is a collaborative space that we want to welcome as much feedback as possible. So yeah, otherwise, I want to wish you all a very good evening. And thank you for joining today's session. Enjoy the rest of your day and see you on 24th July.